Hi, my name is Mary Roberts, Doctoral Physical Therapy with Corvallis Sport and Spine Physical Therapy Clinic. Thank you for joining me. We're going to be talking about working from home and the ergonomics of the home office. This past year has been all about being flexible and making things work. With everything going on, you might not have had as much time or energy to invest in your home office with respect to ergonomics. Or maybe you're still telling yourself that working from your lazy boy with your laptop will do, as this is just temporary. But the reality is, working remotely is going to be a trend that far outlives this pandemic. When we think back to 2017, 2018, only 15% of people had days they worked completely from home. Now that's up to 42%. And the Bureau of Labor and Statistics estimates that 45% of people work in occupations that can be feasibly done remotely. So working from home is going to continue. And at first, it might have sounded like a welcome relief. Between the long commutes, late nights at the office, trying to juggle family time, working remotely might have sounded great. But the reality of trying to be productive at home, finding a balance between being with family and separating yourself to do work, while trying to get a good home office setup might have been just too many things to tackle. So today we're going to go over the basic principles for home office ergonomics. Ergonomics is really how compatible are you and your work and workplace with the goal for optimal efficiency and reduced risk of musculoskeletal disorders. And when I say musculoskeletal disorders, here are some that come to mind that can be linked back to poor ergonomics, ranging from headaches, low back pain, tendonitis, neck pain, shoulder pain. So there's quite an extensive list here. And our goal today is really to give you some principles to help reduce your aches and pains if you're having them, or better yet, prevent them from happening in the first place. We're going to break it down into sections. And off the bat, a couple of great resources I want to mention include OSHA's Computer Workstations e-tool. And if you really want to get nerdy on the details, you can check out the 2015 review on ergonomic standards that I have listed in the references that I'll show later. So let's look at our basic reference picture for good sitting posture. We've got good low back or lumbar support, knees slightly below the hips, the feet are comfortably flat on the ground. That elbow angle is a good 90 degrees. We'll probably remove the armrest, and I'll talk about that later. But then look at the forearms and the wrist. That is a nice neutral straight wrist on that imaginary keyboard. That's really important there. You've got a nice neutral neck position, so head over torso. We're not going into any forward head position that we really want to avoid, but we're keeping everything nice and in line. And the top of that monitor is at or slightly below eye height. And these are all of the key things that you want to think about. When we talk about the desk specifically, most of the time we have limited adaptability, right? The desks are usually fixed 29, 30 inches in height. Do make sure that you have adequate legroom underneath and there's no clutter. And then on the top of your desk, we can think about strategic organization. This is actually a concept called reach zones in ergonomics, represented by the overlapping ovals on the right. Your primary reach zone is that you can reach with your elbow still bent 90 degrees and comfortably at your side. This is your keyboard and your mouse. Your secondary reach zone is that which you have to extend your elbow to get. This is your coffee cup, your cell phone. Your tertiary zone is that dull corner of your desk that you not only have to extend your elbow, but you have to lean your trunk to get to. So, for instance, if you have to use a reference file and you leave it in that dark tertiary zone and have to lean forward several times throughout a day to flip through the pages, you might have some low back or some shoulder soreness by the end of the day. You could have avoided that by taking that reference file, taking it out of the tertiary zone, putting it into the secondary on a document holder. So all you had to do was reach out, extend your elbow a few times. That's essentially strategic organization in an ergonomic sense to reduce injury. Now, let's talk about standing desks because now we're adding in good standing posture. So, head over heart, heart over pelvis. For those of you hyper flexible, make sure that you're not locking out or hyperextending your knees. We're still capturing that good 90-degree elbow angle and neutral wrists and forearms. For those of you that might be new to standing, wanting to try it out, limit it to only 10 or 15 minutes every hour or two at first and limit your total standing time to less than 2 hours. As a 2018 study found that people who stood over that duration had more body aches and pains and some impaired reaction time. So keep it reasonable there. If you're using a laptop, consider either getting a prop stand as shown in this picture, or just stack it up on books to get the top of the screen to eye height. Then invest in an external keyboard and mouse. They're not that much money and they're great for improving your ergonomics when using a laptop. Back to our reference picture, we're going to start talking about chairs, which are the exact opposite of desks. There are a plethora of designs on the market, so what do you really need in a good office chair? Number one, good lumbar or low back support. If you are getting a chair for the first time, I really recommend going in and actually sitting in some to try them, see how the low back feels. If not and you're shopping online, really look at the reviews. Look at what they mention in the lumbar support. If you're in a chair right now that doesn't have the best low back support, you can supplement that by either a lumbar support cushion, get a foam like couch cushion, and even some folded towels, put them behind the small of your low back. You really just want to be able to get your bottom all the way back in the chair and your low back supported. You also really want to look for a chair that has adjustable height. That adjustable height is going to be key in actually most often rising you up to allow you to get that 90-degree elbow angle and neutral straight wrist on your keyboard or mouse. The other thing you want to look at is getting your feet flat on the ground. Now, for those of you that are short like me, by the time you adjust the height and raise it up to get your arms in that neutral position, your feet are probably dangling. What do? Just get a footrest. And no, bending your knees and putting your legs and your feet back on the chair legs doesn't quite count. Get a footrest or just stack something under there. Other things that you want to look for in the chair. You never want to be slouched and around and forward. What that will do is increase pressure in the discs on your spine, cause tightness of your hip flexors, and really put your neck at risk for strain with that forward head position. So you actually want to have a trunk to thigh angle at least 90 degrees, looking for chairs that have the ability to recline the backrest up to 15 degrees is OSHA standards. Make sure there's a lock though so you don't tip over backwards. For your legs, you want to have your thighs about parallel to the ground or look for knees slightly below the hips. You do want a couple inches between the edge of the chair seat and your knees. You have blood vessels and nerves that run behind your knee. Try not to compress those. Armrests, we said we'd come back to these. Most likely, I'm going to say remove or lower them. Armrests can physically block you from getting in close enough to your desk. They are also many areas where armrests can go wrong. They can be too high, causing you to shrug. They can be too low, causing you to overstretch. They can be too wide, causing you to chicken wing, or they can be too narrow, causing you to pinch yourself. Most likely, it's going to be the case to remove or lower them. So that's my soapbox for armrests. Now let's move on and go to the monitor again. We talked about the fact that you want the top of that monitor at or slightly below eye height. You can have a slight tilt in the screen, meaning that the bottom edge is slightly towards you, as shown in this picture. And for distance, you want it about arm length away. For those of you that wear glasses, especially progressives, trifocals, or bifocals, make sure that you're not having to crane your neck to get the reading portion of your glasses in line with the monitor. If that sounds like you might want to talk to your optometrist about getting a pair of single vision glasses just for computer work. Now, speaking of optometry, eye health, follow the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. That'll help reduce your risk of eye strain. This is the world of multitasking, so we have to talk about more than one monitor. If you're using dual monitors, you always want your primary directly in front of you. That's because we want to limit any sustained rotation position of your neck to reduce your risk of neck strain. You always have your primary directly in front of you. If you're using a secondary or a reference, you can have that one at about a 30-degree angle to the side, kind of shown in this picture here. Now, if for some reason you're needing to use both of your monitors equally, in that case, you would want to place the edges together in front of you, almost like a slight V or as if you're opening a book. That would be a little bit more unusual. Usually you're going to have your monitor directly in front of you though. So now let's talk about the keyboard and mouse. We've talked about the fact that you want the elbows 90-degree angle at the side of your body. You can go a little bit up or down from that 90-degree angle, but start there. Now, your wrist, you don't really want to compromise on for the angle. You want to keep it pretty much straight in line with your forearm. A lot of times, what we end up seeing is by the time your wrists get on the keyboard or the mouse, especially if your chair isn't quite at the right height, then we see wrist bending upwards into what we call wrist extension. Wrist extension, for instance, can cause a lot more carpal tunnel pressure. In fact, there was a study done that showed that people who typed in 45 degrees of wrist extension had twice as much carpal tunnel pressure compared to those people who typed with their wrists in neutral. The other thing you want to be cautious with is avoiding heavily resting or propping your wrist on something like the edge of your desk. That can also increase pressure on that underneath carpal tunnel. So having a floating wrist is a little better. And unless you have a specific wrist condition going on and you've been advised to get a particular ergonomics keyboard or mouse, the evidence does not support getting ergonomic models over standard ones. Evidence may come out later or designs, but there just isn't that solid evidence at this point. Now let's look at a couple pictures to highlight this. So the two on the right are showing that wrist extension that we want to avoid. The one on the left is showing awkward deviations that we also want to avoid, not only on the mouse, but make sure that your wrists aren't awkwardly deviating, usually in on the keyboard as well. And one last note about using the mouse before we move on. Avoid having a heavy grip on it. Squeezing it really tightly isn't going to magically funnel your intensity into your work, but it might cause you to have some wrist or arm soreness later on. So light grip is perfectly suitable. And so last key ergonomics things that we're going to mention is lighting. You want to have gentle overhead and diffuse light. It should never be directly blaring onto your screen. If you do have windows, make sure they have blinds or drapes that you can use to control glare. And if you're still having a problem with glare, maybe consider cleaning your monitor. And if you need that extra little bit of motivation for the project you're working on, you can go into some mood lighting. A 2015 study actually found that warm white light was more conducive to creativity, whereas colder colors, daylight, sky blues, were more favorable to concentration. So if you need that extra little kick, you can try playing with the mood lighting in your office. Now, a concept we're going to briefly touch on that's almost as important as getting that good ergonomics is walking away from it. Your goal is to every hour move for a few minutes. Maybe this is standing up, going checking on the kids. Maybe this is doing a couple of posture correction exercises like gently squeezing your shoulder blades together for 5 or 10 reps, or doing a few gentle chin tucks for 5 or 10 reps. Again, we're assuming that you don't have any neck conditions here. But the big thing is that all of us are going to start to slouch a little bit the longer we sit. So try to get yourself out of that position. And especially for those of you that are spending 8+ hours sitting, either studying or walking, you really want to be able to walk away, because if you don't, your mortality risk is going to increase. This was really captured in a study published in 2019 that looked at almost 150,000 people, close to an average of 9 years in their follow-up, studying the association between sitting time, physical activity, and mortality risk. Not surprisingly, the longer you sat, the higher your mortality risk. But that risk was strongly mitigated when supplemented with moderate to high intensity physical activity. Let's take a snapshot at the results. So this is a summary of the Joint Association findings from the Table 19, which appear to be in the center illustration. They reported mortality risk in terms of hazard ratios, which are the number of events in the experimental group divided by the number of events in the control or reference group, which in no case was very active people who got 420 plus minutes of moderate to high intensity physical activity in each week and sat for less than 4 hours a day. So keep in mind that's a pretty active reference group. But when we do compare that to people that said 8+ hours and didn't get any of that higher intensity cardio in, their mortality risk was 1.81. That's pretty substantial. But look at how much that risk was mitigated the more activity these people got. By the time you reach that 300-minute threshold, your mortality risk was only 1.16. For reference, 300 minutes a week is about 42, 43 minutes per day. You can get that in bouts of 10 minutes, Maybe that's doing a brief exercise video for 20 minutes in the morning and then walking the dog for 20 minutes in the afternoon. That's actually a pretty feasible schedule when you think about it in terms of that. And it really does mitigate some of those risks that we see with increased sedentary time. And so that was kind of a good summary of not only what good office ergonomics is, what that looks like, but then from a more comprehensive health perspective, getting in some of those stretches, some of those posture reversal moves, the importance of actually walking away from your desk, getting some of that cardio. So especially for those of you working at home, studying at long hours at home, really take care of yourself, practice good ergonomics, and also practice walking away from that wonderful home office setup that you now know how to do. Heal all the references that I used, and thank you guys for joining me.